Coming up on this episode, the Warriors get their 7th win in the last 8 games with a comprehensive 129-107 blowout victory against the Jazz in Utah on Monday night. So, with optimism having resurfaced on the Warriors season, where can Golden State get to by the time the playoffs roll around? Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates podcast after another impressive win for the Warriors, 129-107 blowout victory against the Jazz in Utah on Monday night. As I said in the intro, their 7th win in the last 8 games, building up to their hottest stretch of form, the most momentum they've had so far this season. Of course, came on the back of a 49ers loss. I thought I'd mention it. I know it's a sore point for people, so we'll move on straight away, but it was disappointing. I'm not going to say that I know the heartbreak that everyone else, a lot of other 49er fans are going through. I'm not that committed to it, but I am committed to a lot of sporting teams. And trust me, if you are feeling the pain at the moment from that, I do understand where you're coming from based on some of the other teams that I support in my life and how committed and how much I've loved them over my life. And when you lose the ultimate glory like that in such fashion, going to overtime, having so many opportunities, it's hard. It really is hard. But we'll move on because we want to get positive again, focus on this Warrior season, which is starting to come around a bit, starting to bounce back. And later in the episode, I'll get into a little bit of where I think the Warriors can get to. One, obviously, by the end of the regular season. But, this is still a team that wants to pride itself on playoff performances, and we'll discuss a bit about that as well. But in terms of last night's victory, again, really impressive. 129-107. The offense and the defense were both fantastic. So you look at the defense, I think a defensive rating of 101 in that game was really good and continues to be really good since Draymond Green's return. And specifically after that Atlanta game, where they obviously lost, and they've won 5 straight now since then, and the defense has been absolutely superb. But I thought offensively, again, it was a really, really good performance. I'm not going to say a perfect performance because, they shoot 48% from the floor, 45.5% from three-point range. I mean, from 3, you're not going to get too much better than that. But I thought in terms of their work on the inside, they missed some layups that they would have otherwise made. I mean, they put up 129. They probably missed 5 or 6 layups they just should have made, especially Wiggs. Wiggs missed a few. JK a couple, Klay I think might have missed a couple. They could have put up 140 plus points easily, and so I'm not going to say it's a near perfect. I'm not going to say it's a perfect offensive performance, but I think it was near perfect. And I just think the way they played, like, you're going to have execution issues. Like, some nights you're just not going to shoot the ball as well. You're going to miss some layups like they did last night, particularly against a big Utah team. It's going to happen. But I think as fans, if you can just see that, hey, they're playing the right way, they're playing a style that's going to be productive and efficient more often than not, then you live with some nights where you just miss some shots you'd otherwise make. You live with that if you're playing the right way. And I think the Warriors have been doing that here over the last few games, and that was again the case against the Jazz. I think they tried to play with pace. They tried to get out in transition, take advantage of a Utah lineup where, they're starting 6'11" John Collins at the 3, 7-foot Larry Markin at the 4, 7'1" Walker Kessler at the 5. So I think they did a really good job of, getting out, trying to, play with pace, and really got the game on their terms really early and really had it in control. They led by 8 after the first quarter. Utah took the lead briefly in the second, but then the Warriors closed the first half really well. Obviously, that Draymond buzzer beater running 3 at the halftime buzzer was absolutely extraordinary. But that's the kind of thing that is going Golden State's way at the moment. Like, when you're down in the dumps and you're not playing well, as they have done for majority of the season up until these last 8 to 10 games, those kind of things go against you, and that's what the opposing team's doing. And I think that halftime buzzer beater from Draymond, I think that is reflective of how the Warriors are playing at the moment, where a lot of things are just going their way, but they're doing that of their own accord. And I think that was just another another piece where you can say, you know what, they get momentum out of that. They come out in the third quarter, don't dominate the third quarter, but again, have control of the game, get it out to double digits, end up leading by 13 at the end of the third. And then I think Utah got it back to 9, and that was the closest they got in the fourth. Steph comes back in, and has 5 threes in the fourth quarter. Warriors end up winning by 22. The game was over with 4 or 5 minutes remaining, essentially. So just a really good offensive performance, really good defensive performance. Offensively, today for me, it's Valentine's Day. Tomorrow for those in America, it will be. And they really try to share the love offensively. And I think it's, what the Warriors ideally want to do moving forward, because so much of the season has been predicated on, Steph and not having enough support for him. Well, I think Monday night, they had too many options for the Jazz to try and combat. And I think they did a really good job of feeding the hot hand kind of when it came, but also, not overplaying that and still playing within the style that they want to play. So Steph, comes back in, seals the game with those 5 threes in the fourth quarter after what was a pretty average game. He had 10 points through the first 3 quarters. Pretty underwhelming performance from him up until that point. Comes back in, finishes with 25. But again, the offensive execution for Steph to have 10 assists, 1 turnover. That's the other thing, is the Warriors seem to be limiting their turnovers. They're just limiting their general mistakes here over this stretch, and that's what they're doing. And Steph had a quote with the Ringers' Logan Murdoch the other day, saying that we've built a chemistry and an expectation of when we're locked in, we win. And that doesn't go away as quick as people might think. And I think that's a really telling statement, and has, generally always been the case for the Warriors over the past few years here, is when we're locked in, we win. And I think this stretch is showing that still remains the case. That statement, I wrote on Blue Man Hoop yesterday after the game, that statement still rings true. When we're locked in, we win. And I think the Warriors have been locked in over these last 8 games. And it just happens in the fact that these mistakes that can often prove fatal, especially in such a talented league where the competition is so close, some of these fatal mistakes, they're just not making. Like, they're not having 17 to 20 turnover games, right? They're not fouling a crap ton and sending the other team to the free throw line, to a point where you just can't make up for it, right? So I think they're just not inflicting wounds on themselves. And when they're doing that, and when they're just playing basketball and executing really well, then they're still a really, really good team and a hard team for anyone to beat. And they're still more than talented enough to win their fair share of games and try and get a spot in the playoffs here. So Klay was another notable piece, obviously, for the Warriors with his 26 points, 11 of 19 shooting. Did a lot of it from the mid-range area kind of thing, because he went 3 of 7 on threes, which is good, but obviously that just makes up 9 of his points. So to get to 26, I thought was impressive. Had a really nice stretch to start the fourth quarter again when Utah could have made a little bit of a run there with Steph off the floor. Had 10 points himself in the fourth quarter. And, for me personally, just as a big Klay fan, when he hit that 3 at the end with a few minutes to go, that was the ball game there. And when he hit that, just to see, his reaction with GP2 and everyone else, I just, it makes me so happy to watch him being happy and watch him having fun out on the floor, because, so many times this season it's been the opposite, where he's looked despondent and he's been disappointed in himself. He's been disappointed, obviously, in the team performances as well. And that's hard to see as a guy who, loves this sport, largely centered around Klay Thompson. And it's so good to be able to see him having fun and being happy out there. So I'm so happy that he was able to have a bounce-back game. Of course, it's about backing it up now. He had a good game against Philly a couple of games ago, and then had a stinker against the Suns on Saturday. So it's about getting consistency for Klay. But he too had a really good quote in that Logan Murdoch article. It said that Klay's willing to accept a lesser role to remain with the Warriors moving forward. Of course, in an expiring contract this season, probably going to head into free agency if a contract extension isn't forthcoming. he was quoted as saying, "I just think it's a special, special group. And then when we win and got so many championships together, it's like a bond for life. It's probably the best part of the job, honestly. Trumps the money, trumps the fame, just being able to have a bond for life with those guys," which I think is really telling. And hopefully, I think a lot of Warrior fans saw that the Klay piece of that article is, a lot of great self-awareness there, and obviously the ability to accept a lesser role and remain with the team. He's still going to have these nights where he's a really, really key part with that 26 points against the Jazz. He's still going to have these. Other nights, it's going to be more like Phoenix, where, he only plays 24 minutes, doesn't necessarily close the game. It's going to come and go with Klay. That's just a fact. But obviously, if the overall numbers are still really good, if he feels comfortable and he's happy, then that's the biggest thing. And obviously, he's already, learning to accept a lesser role with the fact that, JK's really come in and become a second scoring option. I mean, Draymond outlined that in the post-game press conference yesterday, talking about what, kind of the impact of his suspension had. And he said that it really helped develop JK into a second option on this team. So clearly the team has, or at least Draymond has, considers JK the second guy now. And, Klay, as a result, is taking a bit of a back seat in that. Pods is obviously playing so well. Pods has averaged the most minutes of any Warrior player in this 8-game stretch, and they're 7-1. And that just goes to show. Some of the stats on Pods are just, like, I wrote an article about him yesterday. I'm assuming it's the same. I'm assuming it's the same after yesterday's game. But before yesterday's game, he was in Golden State's best 8 lineups by net rating, minimum 10 minutes played this season. That's ridiculous for a rookie. You had to play 50 NBA games in Golden State's best 8 lineups by net rating this season, minimum 10 minutes, and in 12 of the best 14. That's remarkable. But back on Klay, great to see, just to finish off. It's just so happy for him, and hopefully he can continue this before the All-Star break and post that as well. And then first half, or even at the third quarter, you could say the Warriors, rode the hot hand of Wiggs a little bit as well. He made a couple of threes, got fouled by Colin Sexton on a 3-point attempt as well. Not a spectacular Wiggs game by any stretch, but 17 points, making all 3 of his 3-point attempts. Just a really good Wiggs game. And if this is what you get on 9 out of 10 occasions or 8 out of 10 occasions, then this is all you need. This is really good. This is a Wiggs game where, again, he's really locking in defensively from a perimeter defense point of view, and he's just being an efficient offensive threat. He missed some layups, yep, sure. But again, if you're playing the right way, if you're able to impact the game in more ways than one, then I think that's just, it's been a really big positive for Wiggs over these last couple of weeks. It was ultimately why the Warriors weren't willing to give him up at the trade deadline. And then JK had his 14 points as well. Wasn't an overly good game. Not a great, like I was talking to a mate about it yesterday, not a great matchup for him, for a guy that lives on the inside, and you got to go in there and you've got a really good shot blocker in Walker Kessler, another 7-footer in Marketing, 6'11" John Collins, like a big Utah lineup. Not the best matchup for him, and he got blocked by Kessler on a couple of occasions. Still had a stretch kind of late first, early second quarter where, again, in those non-Steph minutes, he's really the focal point, and he took advantage of that and got some buckets. I do want to give him credit as well in terms of his free throw shooting, he just gives the Warriors an element they otherwise don't have. And it allows him to still put up numbers and still be a productive player, even when he doesn't have a great game. So he has 4 field goals yesterday. Not great, but he gets to the line 6 times, makes 5, and that gets him up to 14 points. And that's such a big difference for him and for the Warriors, in contrast to when you need Klay or Wiggs to be a second scorer. And early in the season, those guys just have single-digit scoring games because they make 3 or 4 field goals, and they just don't get to the free throw line. So they can't boost their points tally at all because they just don't get to the line. And so instead of having a 9-point game yesterday, JK has 14, and that obviously looks so much better. And, I keep saying it, he's having some not great games here, and he's still having 14, 16, 18 points. And that's just who he is now. And again, I was talking to a mate about it yesterday. It's funny how, 30 games ago now, over 30 games ago, it became notable when he was scoring double digits. And 5 or 6 games went through, and it's like, oh, JK's on this run of 5, 6 double-digit scoring games, and now it's not even a thing. It's just this is what he does. A bad game is 14 points, and so again, not great, but still some encouraging signs there with the fact that not a good game, and he still is able to produce and contribute to a dominant win. Then you've got Draymond and Pods playing around those guys. So they're obviously the main 4 guys kind of offensively. Pods, again, great to see him shooting the ball. Some of his footwork stuff around the rim is really good, just contributes in so many aspects. Draymond, again, near triple-double, 12, 9, and 8. Some really good defense as well. Those two combined for 22. And then GP2, who I spoke about on last episode, how amazing and surprisingly amazing I thought he looked in that Suns game, and he backed it up yesterday. 11 points on perfect 4 of 4 shooting, so he's now 9 of 9 shooting since coming back. He's just such a perfect fit. He's obviously one of the best defensive players, defensive guards in the league. And then what he can do offensively, where he just knows where to be, when to cut at the right time. He's made both his 3s so far since return, so that is just, you continue to underestimate, I think, the impact that he can have on this team. And, he's come back and shown it straight away. There's been no kind of building into it for him. It has been straight having an impact, has been fantastic. And the Warriors are just a better team when he's playing, and the same can be said for Pods, and obviously the same is said for Draymond, who's just unlocked so many things for them on both sides of the floor since his return. Probably the most notable aspect for me, maybe outside, the really good Klay game, was TJD. So for the second consecutive game, he doesn't play at all in the first half, and then Kenny Atkinson goes to him in the second half, just a side point. So Kenny Atkinson was obviously coach for yesterday's game. Steve was in Belgrade for Dejan Milejevic's funeral, which is fantastic, for Steve and for some of the others, for some of the other members of the Warriors organization to go over there and be there for that is critical. I think it was crucial, really, really important. And so it's fantastic that they went over there. And Kenny coached a good game, and that included going to TJD in the second half. He has 11 points, 4 rebounds, and a block in 9 minutes. He's a plus 14. It wasn't anything we didn't already know about TJD. Like, we know what he does. His athleticism gives him, provides him as a rolling threat, which the Warriors don't otherwise have. He combined with Steph and Klay. He's got this thing with Klay where, like, those two have a 2-man combination, which is, I don't know, pretty unique kind of thing. Like, they seem to connect a lot. Klay is not a ball handler by any means, but it seems when TJD is out there, he seems willing to, hey, give me the ball, let me run a pick and roll with TJD. Seems a lot more willing to do it when, TJD's out there than when he's not, which is funny because TJD doesn't play a whole lot, and he's been getting some DMPs here. I mean, he had a DMP against Brooklyn. He's played just over 13 minutes, or less than 13 minutes, I think, over his last 4 games, which included that DMP. So he's been out of the rotation here, and not surprisingly so necessarily, given, Draymond comes back. Draymond's inserted to the starting center. Steve confirms that Draymond's primarily a 5 moving forward. Leaves Loon, Saric, and TJD as bench options, and there's a squeeze on here, right? But with what he can do as a rolling threat, with what he can do with his athleticism defensively in terms of being a rim protector, the Warriors just have to utilize these assets that he brings to the table. They just do. And I don't know yet. Like I've spoke about it at length on the last couple of episodes, but you've got TJD playing just over 9 minutes. You've got Loon playing 11 minutes. You've got Saric playing 11 and a half minutes. You can't have I'm sorry, I don't like it. You can't have 3 guys playing between 9 and 12 minutes who are essentially playing the same role. Now, I know Saric might play, if you're playing with Draymond, then Saric is technically your 4-man maybe, but I don't care. Like, I don't like seeing those 3 guys all get the same amount of minutes. I think the difference between the 3 of them, I think, is negligible sometimes. And so if you've got a higher upside prospect in TJD, who, I mean, he's 4 years at college, 23 years of age, so I'm not saying he could be an all-star or anything, but he does have a higher ceiling right now than what Looney and Saric do. And I think you've just got to pick one or two of those guys and just say, post All-Star break, all right, this is our guy for the foreseeable future. And, let's play both, two of those guys 15 plus minutes, and the third one just gets squeezed out of the rotation completely. And I just give TJD 15 minutes a game. Just give 15 minutes a game, because you've seen what's happened to the Warriors here when they've delved or dived more into the youth. And you've seen what's happened with Kuminga, all of a sudden emerged, risen to the second best scorer on this team, a perfect ancillary support for Steph Curry, plays in a way the Warriors don't otherwise have. And then Pods as well, who, has compared himself as a mini Draymond, and he really is. Like, what he can do in terms of impacting the game in a multitude of ways. He's averaged the most minutes over this stretch. Like, it's unbelievable. And the Warriors are winning with these guys. And I think TJD could be the same. I think he's a winning player. He's plus 53 on the season now in 506 minutes. The Warriors are better with him on the floor. And I understand it's hard to, manipulate some of these lineups where you've got the three basically backup center options off the bench. I get it. But I just think he might be the best of them, and he's probably going to be the best of them if you give him the runway and give him the opportunity to be able to play 15 minutes every night and see what he can do. Play 7-8 minutes every half. I just think he's going to be a really impactful piece. I guess the question mark is, are you going to trust in that guy come playoff time, or are you going to go back to Loon? And that's probably going to be the question mark for me, where it's the worst thing to do would be to, give him playing time after the All-Star break and then get to playoff time and the Warriors do make it and then just go straight back to Loon. That would just be almost a waste kind of thing. As we saw a bit with JK down the second half of last season, where he kind of really came into his own, and then Wiggs came back in the playoffs and he got benched. And, some of that stuff from late last regular season would certainly have helped JK and having got to the point where he's now, it would have helped. But you've got to look at this from a long-term standpoint. That includes the playoffs. And I think you've just got to commit to something. And if that is, no, we don't think TJD is going to be ready come playoff time, then just go to Loon and say, TJD, it's not your time right now. I get the optionality, the versatility of having those three guys who all offer different stuff. But I think in terms of who's the best two-way prospect, the best two-way player of that group, then I think in time it's TJD. It might be TJD right now, and in time I certainly think it will be if you give him the opportunity to play. Just lock him into 15 minutes off the bench, and that's what I'd like to see. Just 10 games after the All-Star break. I know you don't want to ruin a good thing, but I don't think TJD is going to do that. I think he's going to add to what you're doing right now, and 15 minutes a game for 10 games after the All-Star break. Reevaluate after that. See where you're at. I know, Steve's been pretty willing this season to change things up on the fly. I mean, he's had to do it a lot because the Warriors haven't necessarily found something. But I'd just like to see it. I would like to see it because I think he can be that impactful to the Warriors. So moving forward here, it's kind of a nice segue into the second half of the season. We've got a couple of games here until the All-Star break. Where can the Warriors get to? Because there's obviously some renewed optimism now on what they could possibly do. They're back over 500 for the first time since late December, 26th and 25, up to 10th in the Western Conference. So they're in the play-in tournament right now. I think it was Warriors Muse on Twitter that has stated the Warriors probably need to go 22-9 over their last 31 games to get out of the play-in tournament, get into a top 6 seed, which would leave them at 48 and 34 on the season, which would be quite extraordinary given that's 4 wins better than last season, where I think they finished 44 and 38. So that would be remarkable if they got there. I think that's a pretty tough task to do, and I think realistically, I think it's going to be I mean, the Western Conference is deep. It's really talented. I think it's going to be a struggle to win that many games to get up to the 6th seed. I think their best opportunity is to probably try and get to 7th. So right now they're 4 games back from the Suns in the 6th seed, which is not insurmountable. Like, they could do it, but going 22-9, that's going to be tough. I think their best option is to probably try and get the 7 seed, win a playing game straight up, get the 7 seed, and then you look at the top of the West. I think if you can draw OKC first round, I think that might be a good matchup. Because I know that the Thunder beat us 3 out of 4 times early in the regular season. I actually think it's a good matchup for the Warriors. I do. I think that a couple of those games they could have easily won. The one they did win on that Steph bank floater, the Thunder could have won that easily as well. I think that'd be a really good series, kind of reminiscent of the Kings matchup last season. I think the playoff experience that the Warriors have might really come to the fore against a young Thunder team. Who knows? But I got a mate who goes to the Thunder, and I keep saying to him, I was like, you don't want to see us first round of the playoffs. And I don't think any of these teams, who the hell wants to see Steph Curry first round of the playoffs if you're a top 3 seed in the Western Conference? You don't. Ask Sacramento last season. You don't want to see him. Who the hell wants to face LeBron James first round of the playoffs if the Lakers, the 8 seed or whatever? Who wants to see that? No one wants to see that at the top of the West. Promise you. Anthony Edwards last season said he really wants to in the offseason said he really wants to face the Warriors. Does he? First round, Minnesota have had such a good season. The threat of Steph Curry and just getting knocked out round 1, you don't want to see it. I promise, those teams at the top of the West do not want to see it. The only team that do maybe would be Denver, because the whole Jokic thing, is going to be tough for the Warriors to try and handle, as it is for any team, but the Warriors specifically. So maybe Denver would be happy to face Golden State. But even then, Steph, man, the way he's playing, what's that, 27 threes now in his last 3 games? Just a really, really hot stretch of form. It's interesting. Warriors have kind of been compared to the Lakers of last season a little bit in terms of, can they get this reintroduction of talent, not necessarily from, obviously they didn't make any trades, but back from injury in terms of GP2 and CP3s coming back, and just JK being better and improving as much as he has. There's been this, can they get the influx of talent back and then go on a run in the second half of the season and get into the play-in tournament, get the 7 or 8 seed and do some damage in the playoffs, as the Lakers did, where they ultimately got to the Western Conference Finals. Now we're getting some comparisons to the Celtics of the year before, rather than the Lakers of last season. So if you look at the Celtics of 2021-22, obviously ended up facing the Warriors and losing to the Warriors in 6 games in the NBA Finals. But after 50 games, they were, guess what, 25-25. And then they finished the season ridiculously 26-6 over the last 32 games, finished 51-31 on the season. As I said, get to the NBA Finals, where they could have easily won, but again, Steph Curry happened. Could there be something like that, where the Warriors, it looks like they've just clicked. They've just clicked on both ends of the floor. And that's what I think is making it kind of sustainable, is that they're playing well on both ends of the floor. They're not relying on some ridiculous shooting stretch. Yes, Steph's shooting the ball unbelievably well over this period, but they're not relying on that necessarily. He had 10 points in the first 3 quarters yesterday, and they're up 13 on the road. They're not absolutely reliant on Steph going bonkers. And so I think that's what makes this sustainable, is that right now over the last 8 games, they are factually just the best team in the league over the last 8 games. And they are a top 5 offense, and they're a top 5 defense. And so you look at that, and that's what I think would provide you optimism, is that it doesn't look like this is a fluke. This is a long enough period now where it's this is sustainable. This isn't fluky. This isn't some ridiculous shooting stretch where they're shooting 50+% from 3 or whatever. Maybe they're just a really good team again. Maybe they've found something. And so it's going to be really interesting to see another big test against the Clippers tomorrow at Chase. Clippers have obviously been unbelievable over the last 35, 40 games, but they have hit a bit of a hurdle here towards the All-Star break. Still going to be a huge, huge matchup. So looking forward to that one. Other than that, guys, I'll finish it up there. A bit of a shorter episode, but not necessarily too much to talk about from yesterday's game. Nothing too notable apart from the TJD stuff. Otherwise, just a really team-orientated, positive, impressive Warrior performance. That's it, really. So we'll finish it up there. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252. Leave me any comments on this YouTube video, or you can tweet me there at POC252. Follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The ongoing support has been crazy. I think we're at 398 subscribers on YouTube. Couple away. Hopefully this episode can get us to 400. Other than that, guys, enjoy your next couple of days. I'll be back possibly after the Clippers game, although I think they've got a back-to-back there facing Utah as well. It's a bit of a weird schedule with obviously the rescheduling of the Utah game. They obviously missed because of Decky's passing, so they've got Utah in Utah, go back, play the Clippers, and then I think they play, I'm pretty sure it's the Jazz again in Utah, is it? I'm just going to double check that. Don't want to factually get things wrong. Yeah, back to back at home to the Clippers and then away in Utah again, which is just to play in Utah twice in the space of 3 days, but then have to go home and play the Clippers in the middle. I mean, just it is what it is, but it's a bit strange. Anyway, we'll finish it up there. I'm kind of trailing off. All right, guys.